Welcome in. No one wants to spend more than they have to on marketing their current business. I don't. As practice owners, I know that you don't. But as we speak with so many practice owners, we see that a lot of them are spending sometimes two, three, five times as much as they need to on marketing. Two things. You need to spend money on marketing. So if you're in the camp of you don't have a marketing budget, this video isn't for you. You need to figure out how to build a marketing budget and spend money on marketing. If you do have a marketing budget and you're spending a bunch of money on marketing, this video is how do you save money and spend less on marketing, specifically in the folds of the business that secretly impact your marketing budget that you're probably not aware of. There's a couple incredible places that aren't marketing that impact directly how much money you have to spend on marketing. So let's dive in.
Yeah, today's an awesome video. I actually really love this. I was kind of thinking through this the other day, and it's kind of funny. If you are spending money on marketing for your business, if you're marketing a bad business, you are actually expediting the death of your business. But if you're marketing a good business, you are watering the garden that's going to flourish and provide for you, for your clinicians, and for everyone else on your team. And so if you don't want to expedite the death of your business, this is probably the perfect video for you. So there's a few things that we need to think about when we're thinking about sort of like where your marketing dollars go to die or thrive. And some of those factors are going to be retention, your intakes, and what is actually working, or how to identify which marketing is actually working inside of your business. And so when we're looking at some of these options, the first segment that we're going to kind of zero in on is going to be your retention. And so retention is a hot topic to talk about because ethically, it's hard to keep someone past, like you can't just keep someone past their sort of their graduation point, right? On an ethics level, you can't do that. And so we're kind of balancing business and balancing what's best for our clients. And I tend to err on, we always go with what's best for our clients. Now, there's some interesting ways to work in retention. When we're talking about retention, don't talk to your clinicians about retention in retention as the word. So some of the methods that you can use to amplify or improve your retention look like during your intake calls, you can have the conversation with a prospective client about standards of care and about what expectations you have for typical clients who come to your practice. And so on that initial call, you can say, hey, typically, for good care, we look at working with our clients for at least 12 sessions or maybe 20 sessions. That gets us to the point where we're able to do some care, some interventions, and a few other things. Does that sound like something you would be able to commit to? And you kind of put them at a point, you kind of set the standard, set the expectation for them before they even get into your practice. Other factors that affect retention look like how effective are your clinicians at rebooking a session after the first session or after the session that they just had. Usually if you have someone on the calendar, or usually if you just call them up or see if they can pick up an extra session here or there or move it around, and you have higher levels of communication, especially if you can get your intake team to help you here, you're going to improve retention.
We think about two therapists on your team. Therapist A, they retain their clients on an average of 10 sessions. Therapist B retains their clients on average for 20 sessions. Therapist A is going to need marketing to place, intake to place twice as many clients on their caseload in a month, in a year, whatever that time frame is that clients churn out, than therapist B. So your marketing costs double on that clinician who doesn't retain to standard, who does not retain to standard. One of the growth tactics as business owners that we've seen practice owners take this past year is transitioning out the clinicians who can't successfully retain clients. And that's a really tough conversation to have with yourself and with your team. But there's a couple of reasons. Great retention leads to better clinical outcomes, which leads to more word-of-mouth referrals and retains your ethical reputation and your branding reputation as a practice. Because if you have a therapist on your team who's just churning clients for poor reasons, for bad clinical matchups, for poor clinical skills, right? And we can't fix that through good management, through good investment, through good training, through good supervision. If there's not an improvement arc there, it's hurting your business. And it's doubling your cost per marketing for that clinician. So it has a huge impact. Equally, intake can have just as big of an impact on doubling your cost inside of marketing. We'll take the same example. Let's say we have one marketing department with a 30% close ratio on all the leads that are coming in when the intake handles them all. And then we have an intake department with a 60% close ratio on all the leads coming in. You will need twice as many phone calls, twice as many leads contacting you if you are in the 30% threshold compared to the 60% threshold. These numbers can look like all sorts of different ranges, but to kind of bottom line it, is this also has a chance to double, triple, quadruple your marketing cost. And if both of these are going on at the same time, you have now compounded how much marketing dollars you have to spend to convert leads on the phone and keep your clinicians with poor retention full. It becomes massive leaky buckets. How do we fix the intake leaky bucket if that's the problem we're having?
Yeah, this comes down to having the data. So have data available, make sure that you're tracking your sales process, your sales statuses, and that's part of what your intake team is doing, is they know that they have to stay organized and stay accountable to their data and the metrics that they're responsible for. So track it is number one. Then once you're tracking, you can start getting a bead of where people are dropping off, especially if you're managing your contacts through pipeline stages. So like stage 1 is maybe a new inquiry. Stage 2 is, did you reach out or connect to that person? Stage 3 might be, did you have a phone call with that person? Stage 4 might be, did you close that person? Did they become a new client? So that's like a simple pipeline. And so as your staff is measuring, monitoring, and staying accountable to those processes, you start realizing where people drop off. And then you can say, well, what is happening at this moment or leading up to this moment that might cause drop off? Sometimes it's just as simple as scripts. So are you saying the same thing to 100 people if they come in? So that way you can adequately decide what needs to be changed or not. Another side to this is, how are you training your team? Are you training your team and keeping them sharp? Are you keeping them on top of the adjustments? Go ahead, Josh.
I just have to pop in here. Training your team on your scripts. I'd say 40% of the time we talk to a practice owner without scripts. 60% of the time, the team is not successfully in following the scripts that they do have. So often training and lack of script following is the bigger issue than no scripts or no guidance.
Yeah, I'll add an extra segment to scripting, but we know the conversations, like the FAQs that people come into for the intake process. People are going to be asking about financing, insurance, out of network, what are the benefits to that? People are going to be asking about which clinician works best for them. People are going to be asking about timing or logistics issues. All of that needs to be listed already and you need to train on it. So if you know that you're going to have the cash conversation, that will be a conversation that you will have in perpetuity. You may as well attack the problem. You may as well have a standard guideline for how you approach the problem and then see how you can improve it over time. I'll also add to that, most people need like 7 to 13 touch points for them to feel comfortable or make it feel like it's like they're interfacing with a real company. And so sometimes just upping the touch points, sometimes upping your brand, how you're producing information. Just because someone opts in doesn't mean that they're necessarily 100% ready right then and there, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to ever work with you. And so I think just overall generating more touch points is always going to be helpful because it just shows, it's just a trust signal. You're a business that's operating and you're here to help them get into their service.
Yeah. So before we talk about marketing's impact on marketing budget, kind of wrapping up your retention and your intake buckets with a bow, all to say is a 1% versus 2% in a category is a 1% improvement from 1 to 2%, but it's actually 100% difference, right? If we convert 15% of our leads versus 30% of our leads that call us, that is twice as many people being enrolled from our marketing, from our Google ads, from our SEO. Same with our retention, right? 5 on average sessions versus 10 on average sessions that clients stay. And here we're just talking about doubles, but I know that there are multiples of this that exist in your business. Talk to a practice Attilio did last week where they have a 4% conversion rate on their Google ad leads, but they have got a 40% conversion rate in their other departments. So sometimes it's you have 5 clinicians on your team who retention is performing great for, and 5 clinicians where it's average, and then 5 clinicians where it's low. But if you look at your full average numbers, they look okay, right? If we look at the average intake numbers for the practice with a 40% conversion rate on other channels, and then we add in the Google ad leads, the overall intake close percentage looked okay, but it was atrocious in one segment. And guess where they were spending all of their active marketing dollars? On Google ads. Or let's say all of your retention energy. If you're spending on that on your average to high performing clinicians already, or you think you're fine there, and your low retaining clinicians never get any attention, support, help, or management guidance, right? You're going to be solving the wrong problems. So you can look department wide or function wide, but often there are smaller sort of line items inside of the department that are performing way lower, way lower than KPI. Let's talk about marketing's impact on marketing. How does choosing the marketing channel, where you choose to market, how does that affect your marketing budget?
Yeah, there's a few ways. I mean, different networks have different prices, like just in and of itself. So a Snapchat ad to reach 1,000 people costs way less than a Google ad to reach 1,000 people. And sometimes that has to do with the targeting or the audience available. Sometimes that just has to do with what the business is doing and how much money they want to charge. Remember, these are kind of like arbitrary numbers. And so sometimes there's just a cost difference between platforms. Some platforms afford you the ability to do different things on them. So a Google ad, you can target someone who's searching for a specific query, which is really important when it comes to mental health marketing. Whereas, something like Snapchat or Facebook ads or something like that, you can't really target that. You can't target someone that Facebook thinks has depression. That doesn't really work out in your favor. And usually you have to talk to a lot more people. And so there's kind of like these pros and cons, these gives and takes between networks. There's also prices that factor in or get factored in based on the audiences that you're trying to reach. So maybe advertising for a really super specific location around Beverly Hills costs more. And it's just because maybe there's more people targeting, pushing the auction prices up for that location. And so depending on how you're targeting, depending on the network, depending on what kind of feedback loops you give to the network to say, hey, this thing is working or not, as well as the post-click experience, all factor in. So post-click experience, I'll just explain that a little bit more. Networks reward you when after someone clicks, the user finds a page or finds an experience where they can either go find more information or opt in. And if you provide that data loop back to the network, oftentimes you get better prices on your ads because they're saying, hey, we are not advertising scammers or spammers or something. We're not advertising people that are just getting lost, like when they go click off of our network. So those are all things to kind of consider when we're looking at pricing. This is all things that we're kind of considering when it comes to choosing what it is that you're doing.
When we think about a couple other facets of marketing impacting marketing, who you are paying to do the marketing. So 3 quick concepts here. You're paying yourself to do the marketing if you're doing the marketing by the business owner, but you might be making $100 an hour or $500 an hour because you're the business owner being compensated for being a business owner, versus if you pay a $40 an hour admin, or on average for the hours they put in, a $40 an hour contractor or agency versus a $10 an hour virtual assistant. Who you choose to perform the marketing will cost you difference. And so choose wisely. But there's other layers of impacts here as well. Your volume changes the cost. We often see the more you spend on Google Ads, your cost per lead goes down or your results go up because you have more data to go through those things. So sometimes increasing volume. If you publish more content into your website, if you go from 1 blog a month to 4 blogs a month, you aren't just 4xing, you're probably 8 to 12xing. You're compounding the work because you're increasing volume. Something like your skill changes cost. We talk to so many practice owners who they say, oh, I ran the Google ad and it didn't work. Or I paid someone to run the Google ad and it didn't work. And they blame the marketing channel, even though billions of dollars are being spent on mental health care marketing successfully right now, instead of blaming the person who did the marketing or did the work. And that's a skill level thing. You know, as a practice owner, that there are good business owners and bad business owners. There are good therapists and bad therapists. There are good marketers and bad marketers. And that's a spectrum of quality of work. As your practice grows, you're gonna have to get better and better quality of work done. So skill affects cost, and then your consistency affects cost. Someone who invests in SEO for 5 years compared to the one who only invested in SEO for 1 year will have a compounded result. Same with the person who networked for 5 years versus 1 year. And then the last one, which is all of these combined. These all have a multiplying effect, which is why seeing marketing success, or when you say, I want to spend less on marketing, or I want my marketing to work better, we just listed like 10 to 12 different things that can double your marketing cost if approached poorly. Imagine if you went through every single one of these and fixed them or changed them, you would see both a decrease in how much your marketing costs and an increase in how much return you're getting from your marketing. And that's what we want for your practice.
Yeah, I hope you guys all see this as a big ROI conversation, right? This is the difference maker oftentimes between the practice that expedites their death or their failure and the practice that maybe just barely gets by, and then the practice that's really, really flourishing, is they probably just have a couple things that they've locked in place. They've been able to manage and produce consistently in that sector, and then off to the moon they go.
Yeah. Look for ways to compound your marketing costs and decrease leaky buckets. Often the solution isn't spending less on marketing. It's just getting the dollars that you are currently spending on marketing to get the result that they should be getting. We'll see you next time.
Good luck, guys.